Hey everybody, this is Denny.
And this is James from TeaDB.org, bringing you guys another episode, and this is episode number 10.
Cool. So, what are we doing today, James?
Yep, so we're going to be continuing our series on Japanese green teas and fresh teas from 2013. And today we're brewing a Sencha, which is the most common type of Japanese tea from the company Ocha. And it's called Chiran Sencha.
Cool. So I don't know anything about Sencha besides the fact that it's widely popular in Japan and it's a green tea. So what's the deal?
Yeah, so it's the most popular tea, like we've stated, and it's just kind of a standard green tea. It's processed a little bit differently from the Chinese teas, but the oxidation stopped pretty much immediately. And Japan, unlike China or India, pretty much exclusively only drinks green tea. And there's a couple different forms. We covered matcha last time. There's other forms like gyokuro. But Sencha is by far the most common one you'll see in just Japanese households in general.
Cool.
Yeah. And so one notable thing about this one is it's special because it's from Shincha. And Shincha is the first harvest of Japanese green teas of the season. So this tea has literally never been in storage. It's been shipped straight from the tea farm, basically through the vendor to myself, and the vendor being Ocha.
I'm excited to taste this. It's going to taste fresh. It's going to taste delicious. So what do we have here in terms of technology, equipment? What do we got going on?
Yep. So this is a Japanese teapot, which is also called a kyusu. We have a variable temperature heat kettle right here, which is very important in this case because we want to get it to a very specific temperature. And in this case, we're going to about 155, 160 degrees. And the higher temperature you go, the more bitterness, the more flavor you're going to extract. And in the case of green tea, that is bitterness.
I see. So you said 155 to 160 Fahrenheit.
Yep.
How much tea leaves to water are we going to use here?
So we're using 6 grams of tea, and this kyusu, which is Japanese teapot, holds about 9 ounces of water. We're realistically only going to get about to 8, so the leaf to water ratio is 0.75 in this case.
Okay.
Which I would say is fairly standard. The more leaf you use, you're going to have to be careful to not go too high in brew times. So the first thing we're going to do is preheat our teapot. And while we're at it, we are going to preheat all of our teaware. So we'll just let that sit for just a second. And we're going to pour into our devices. So ideally you would have just one of these, but because we kind of have the Chinese devices, we don't have a larger serving device. Alright, and we're going to preheat our cups. And pour out.
I'll let you do that.
Yep.
One of the benefits of having one arm is when I'm with other people like James, they get to make tea for me.
Yep. And so we're going to pour the tea leaves into here. So it's important not to let your tea leaves sit in here for too long, and what we're going to actually do is smell it, and they're just going to kind of lightly cook in that hot water that we've had there.
Mm-hmm. And you can do the same thing with, lovely, with oolong as well. You'll do that after your rinse. But drinking and enjoying the aroma of tea at every stage of the brewing process is recommended. Why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tea is much more than simply a tasting experience. It's a smelling experience. It's just an experience of culture and of relaxation as well. So we're going to let this go for about a minute.
Cool.
Yep. And so try your best not to go over in terms of temperature or steep time, as you're going to get more bitterness.
Okay. In terms of brewing, so this is very different than, let's say, an oolong in the sense that this isn't going to be brewed 6 to 8 times. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so green tea in general, you're going to have to brew for far less times than like an oolong. And 6 to 8 times might even be understating it. Sometimes you can go for even 15 times.
Right.
This tea you can brew for maybe 3 times to 4 times. A lot of it depends on how you're enjoying the tea. And you can also tell that we're just brewing in a much larger device, so you're going to be extracting more tea per steeping.
Cool.
All right, so I think we are approaching a minute, so we are going to pour out.
Wow.
So you can see that color.
And we don't do a rinse on this tea.
No, we don't.
Okay.
And that's partially because, like, as far as steepings go, we are getting far less out of it, so it would simply be a waste of tea. And we can smell it one last time.
Okay. It's lovely. Mm.
Yeah. Okay, so let me...
I'm going to toss my...
Oh, right.
Yeah. Crucial. So I'm not sure if it's coming up on camera quite yet, but excuse me, the color of this is absolutely wonderful. It's got a, I don't know how to say it, it's kind of like a lime green, almost neon yellow green color to it. You can see a little bit of the superfine particulate of the tea leaves themselves floating. It's quite nice.
That just barely made it through the strainer. So I'm getting a very sweet grassiness to this tea, which I would say is very typical of kind of Japanese green teas, especially the fresh kind.
Definitely, yeah. I'm definitely getting that grass to it. There's a, like you said, a very sweet aspect to it. What would I do? Maybe it's sort of like melon a little bit, but not overdoing it at all. Perfect on the steep time. It feels like to me. It's nice and thick, but at the same time, it's not at all bitter. But I could feel it almost coming on. It's almost teasing my mouth with a little bit of bitterness. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's kind of how green tea is. And if you like your flavors more bold, you will go for that higher temperature and extract more of that bitterness. And that also tends to be what happens as we progress as far as steepings go. We're going to slowly be raising the temperature and raising the steep times the further along we get as far as our tea goes. And so you're going to see the color change along with the flavor and the aroma.
So, James, when would you drink this kind of a tea? What do you think it pairs well with or experience?
That's a good question. And I think Sencha is it's probably one of the most robust of the Japanese green teas. And I've enjoyed Sencha even iced. Which is very, very nice, especially during the summertime, which we're now approaching. Mm-hmm. But I feel like you could enjoy this in the morning with a good meal in a number of different contexts. I wouldn't restrict myself too much on this tea.
Yeah, one thing that I find is that green teas can cause a little bit of stomach distress for me. So it does make sense for me to have a meal in my stomach before I start drinking some green tea.
That's a good point. For me, I don't have that side effect quite as badly. So I noticed that young pu'er probably affects me the most in terms of like having to drink that on a full stomach. So I've adjusted the temperature, kind of like I've stated, to a slightly higher temperature. So we're probably brewing at about 7 or 8 degrees hotter, so maybe 168, 170 degrees. So still pretty low temperature, mainly because I prefer my green tea to be very light and not to have as much bitterness. But experiment, see what you guys like.
Absolutely. So would it be possible with this type of tea to, let's say, brew it really hot for a really short amount of time?
You could, and the flavor profile you'd extract would be very, very different.
Okay. So that'd be interesting for us to experiment with on the show, and for you guys at home to experiment with. But I can guarantee you that doing it this way is quite delicious.
Yeah. And if you scour the depths of the internet, which can be a very dangerous place, you'll notice that a lot of the real experts at brewing, and there are a number of experts at brewing Japanese green tea, because it is such kind of an in-depth, complex process, they like to use a lot of leaf. So we used a 0.75 to 1 ratio. You'll see some of them using as high as 1.5 or 2 to 1 as far as ratios go.
Wow.
All right, so we should have increased the steep time by about 15 seconds, so that's about a minute, 15 seconds. And you're going to see kind of a stronger, just a more vibrant green color and less pale. Mm-hmm. And we'll probably have a little bit more bitterness in the steeping because we are using a higher temperature. but we will see how it goes.
And just the wet leaves themselves are also totally beautiful. We'll have a peek inside of the
Kyusu.
Yeah, the Kyusu. Thank you. But yeah, absolutely. The color has gotten much more of a forest green, kind of a darker green. We're losing some of that yellow, and really getting more of the deeper green color. Wonderful, and still not too bitter at all.
Yeah. So we're getting more bitterness, and I feel like the body is increasing in this tea dramatically.
Definitely.
The first brew is very, very light, and very, very nice and sweet. But this brings out a lot of those aspects, but more bitterness and body within the tea itself.
More minerals, I'm saying. I feel like more earthy a little bit. The sweetness that we had, sort of the kind of melony, dewy sweetness that was on the first brew, I'm not getting as much. But still getting that kind of the beautiful, good-tasting grassiness with a little bit more of the earthiness. And I totally agree with you. It's more full-bodied, feels a bit bigger in my mouth. Totally delicious. Really enjoying this. It's cool.
And this tea, similar to the matcha, you should drink very, very quickly and immediately. Green tea, in particular, degrades significantly over time, so you should pay close attention to your storage methods. Eliminate a lot of the oxygen that could be stored within the tea, which can cause oxidation, which is certainly unwanted for a green tea that's completely unoxidized. And store it in your fridge if you can.
Cool. So if someone wants to find this tea and drink it themselves, where should they go?
Yeah, so they should go to TeaDB.org to find out more about how to brew this tea, the history of Sencha, and that sort of thing. And you can purchase this tea at o-cha.com. And they have a number of great Japanese tea selections as well as teaware. So I'd highly recommend them as a company.
Fantastic. So that wraps up episode 10 of TeaDB, Tea Talks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week for episode 11.
All right. See you guys.
Cheers.